It's not just the fact that the cycle repeats, it's how fast the cycle seems to start all over again. Just 10 days ago, the nation was gripped by the news of a white supremacist shooter killing 10 people in Buffalo, New York, outside of a Tops grocery store. And while that's still reverberating, then yesterday the news in our country was of a school shooting in a small town in Texas where more than 14 children, and the death toll continues to climb, have been killed by a single shooter. And it feels again like we keep going through these motions over and over again, the same cycle over and over again. And I have to confess to you, as a pastor, as someone whose job is to speak God's presence into circumstances that seem difficult or impossible or heartbreaking, sometimes it feels like, what resources do we have that we haven't already gone to that speak a new word or that speak how we deal with a situation like this? And in moments like that, it's really, really easy to despair, to feel like there is nothing to be said, no hope, no new word. But I do think that we have a witness in the stories of our older brothers and sisters in the faith of what it could look like, what it has looked like before for the followers of Jesus at least, to break the cycles of violence that do seem to keep coming at us. The details change, but part of the witness of the earliest followers of Jesus, following the example and teaching and way of Jesus himself, was to break the cycles that get handed to us as inevitable, the cycles of violence and terror, the cycles of revenge and mutual assured destruction. There's a story that we're going to be hearing this coming Sunday, given to us by the pattern for reading through the scriptures called the lectionary. And it's come to be one of my favorite but also most troubling stories for me. And it comes from the book of Acts. The story goes like this, from Acts 16. One day as we were going to the place of prayer, we met a slave girl who had a spirit of divination and brought her owners a great deal of money by fortune-telling. While she followed Paul and us, she would cry out, "These men are slaves of the Most High God who proclaim to you a way of salvation." She kept doing this for many days. But Paul, very much annoyed, turned and said to the spirit, "I order you in the name of Jesus Christ to come out of her." And it came out that very hour. But when her owners saw that their hope of making money was gone, they seized Paul and Silas and dragged them into the marketplace before the authorities. When they had brought them before the magistrates, they said, "These men are disturbing our city. They are Jews and are advocating customs that are not lawful for us as Romans to adopt or observe." The crowd joined in attacking them, and the magistrates had them stripped of their clothing and ordered them to be beaten with rods. After they had given them a severe flogging, they threw them into the prison and ordered the jailer to keep them securely. Following these instructions, he put them in the innermost cell and fastened their feet in the stocks. About midnight, Paul and Silas were praying and singing hymns to God, and the prisoners were listening to them. Suddenly there was an earthquake so violently that the foundations of the prison were shaken, and immediately all the doors were opened and everyone's chains were unfastened. When the jailer woke up and saw the prison doors wide open, he drew his sword and was about to kill himself, since he supposed the prisoners had escaped. But Paul shouted in a loud voice, "Do not harm yourself, for we are all here." The jailer called for lights, and rushing in, he fell down trembling before Paul and Silas. Then he brought them outside and said, "Sirs, what must I do to be saved?" They answered, "Believe on the Lord Jesus, and you will be saved, you and your whole household." They spoke the word of the Lord to him and to all who were in his house. And in the same hour of the night, he took them and washed their wounds. Then he and his entire family were baptized without delay. He brought them up into his house and set food before them. And he and his entire household rejoiced that he'd become a believer in God. Like I say, that story troubles me as much as I find it beautiful. And I think what troubles me, what provokes me about that story is that here are two leaders of the Christian community thrown into prison and seen as troublemakers when all of a sudden the news of Jesus and their actions starts to cost people some money. And when they're in a position to save themselves, they don't. They stay there in the jail, and it seems to them the most natural thing in the world. Like they knew in that moment, how will we confront the evil that has been shown to us? And it is so clearly ingrained in them. The way of Jesus is so clear to them that instead of panicking and when the earthquake comes running away, or grabbing weapons and saying, when the jailer comes, let's kill him so he can't get us, their immediate response is, let's stay put. This is a chance for us to break the cycle of violence that's been perpetrated against us. And I think that is such an important part of how the early Christian movement responded to the evil that sometimes befell it. That the first followers of Jesus, following the way and the teachings of Jesus, were convinced that in a world where the empire of the day, or the respectable religious leaders of the day, were liable to throw you in prison or throw rocks at you or have you executed or something like that to stop you, the way of Jesus wasn't to respond to evil with more evil or violence with more violence, or to have a posture of, because they might get us, we have to get them first, so we better be armed to the teeth in case they come for us. Their response was, we will break the cycle. And there they are in jail, singing hymns, and nobody has promised them a jailbreak, right? Nobody has said to them that if they're faithful, an angel or the Lord will come and bust them out. Others in the story of Jesus have already lost their lives at the hands of the authorities, with nobody stepping in at the last moment to rescue them. So there they are doing the only thing they knew to do, singing hymns and praying and letting other people listen as they sing and pray. And when the earthquake comes, their response is not to run away or to arm themselves to get the jailer back or to get revenge or justice or whatever they might say it was, but to say, no, the cycle of violence, of evil being responded to with evil stops with us. Because we are followers of Jesus, who's brought us a new way of living in the world, whose way of dealing with evil is to absorb it in the cross and not to have to respond punch for punch, violence for violence, blow for blow. These men, Paul and Silas, had been tortured. They were not just thrown in jail wrongfully. They had been tortured, and the authorities, the police, the local civil leaders, as well as a lynch mob, were all there cheering them on to see them beaten. And as they're waiting for more punishment, Paul and Silas says, no, it will end with us. We will not return evil for evil. We will not run away and put the jailer on the hook. We'll stay here and completely defy everybody's expectations. That's what blows the jailer's mind when he sees that Paul and Silas have not run away, leaving him on the hook, that surely he'd be made a public example of, and they'd torture or kill or crucify the jailer if he had let his charges go. Paul and Silas are concerned for this one who was their enemy. I don't mean to say that if we find ourselves in a moment of panic or some terrible traumatic shooting like happens, that we're not supposed to run for cover. Yes, run for cover, absolutely. I'm not saying that sometimes those active shooters don't need to be stopped immediately, sometimes with powerful force, yes. But I want to suggest the witness of the early church 2,000 years ago and the witness of the church in this moment, to speak a word that's different, might just be, our calling is not to immediately say, we need to be ready to hit back or hit in advance because somebody might come and get us. But what if the cycle of violence stops with us? What if my immediate response to the world around me is not, I've got to be constantly ready to get somebody else because they might get me? But that when evil is visited upon us, we break the cycle and we won't respond to evil with more evil. That we won't say the solution is I need to arm myself more to stop somebody else who might be armed, but rather to say, I choose the vulnerable love of Jesus that goes into the world, disarmed, and announcing God's reign comes not by killing enemies, but by dying for them, by vulnerable love. I wonder what would happen. I wonder what would happen if our witness to the watching world was to say, when terrible, evil things happen, we will not respond to hostility with more hostility. We will not respond to evil with more evil, but the cycle stops with us. In the earliest generation of the followers of Jesus, that was their witness. And the watching world saw it, and they said, what gives these people this kind of courage that they are willing to bear not only torture and pain and all that, but also that when they have the chance to pay somebody back or punish them or get weapons so they can stop somebody from hurting them again, they refuse and instead seek to love the person who has inflicted harm on them. How can we break the cycles of violence? How can we break the cycles of hatred? How can we break the cycles of revenge that seem to be consuming us and that over and over and over again we fall into? I know in these days we are going to keep batting around what feels like the same litany we've learned, where there will be nice words and solemn words and vigils and prayers for a while, and then some new thing in the news cycle will distract us, and it would be very easy to let things go, and then the cycle will repeat all over again. What could make this moment different, or what could make our witness as followers of Jesus different in this moment, even if it doesn't change everything overnight? You and I, because we are followers of Jesus, can commit that when we find ourselves in circumstances of hostility, whether they are horrific and terrible and disastrous like a school shooting, or whether they're just the day-by-day hostilities of people around us, you and I can be people who say we refuse to keep perpetuating the same old cycle of answering evil with more evil, of mean with mean, of racism with more racism, of hatred with more hatred. We will be people who respond to meanness with compassion, to apathy with vigilance, and who respond to anger and violence with the way of Jesus. That's what Paul and Silas do, and that's what changes everything. This weekend, as we spend time looking at this story, I invite you to join us for conversation, to look at how we might break the cycles of violence and of hatred wherever they are there to ensnare us. See you Sunday.